Well, good morning, Shad, and waiting on Congressman Green to show up. And welcome to all of our attendees. We have about 30 on, and I'm sure some more will be hopping on as we um, go along in the program. I hope you saw like the results of the poll I did. 100% of the people on the call have done their 2020 census. And
That
there's
was awesome.
Green.
Hello, everybody. I'm Al Green, and I'm here with my capable, competent, and qualified staff. We are in my Houston office, and it's my honor to be with you today. I have some persons who have really worked hard on this event, and I appreciate you for calling it to our attention. I see our former president, state president, Mr. Bogany is there, and he is celebrating 30 years of service by way of the airwaves, radio, 30 years. That's a wonderful accomplishment. It's probably the longest running program of its type in Texas and possibly in the country. So my congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to talking to you about the things of interest. So rather than take over your meeting, just let me say thank you and then yield to the appropriate person so that we may move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Green, for being here today. I'm Amber Burton Alfred. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs and Advocacy for HAR, and we're really happy to have you here on our show today. We've been doing different roundtables with our elected officials to make sure that our members can stay in touch with you. And Shad Bogany, as you know, is your federal political coordinator or your FPC. So I'm going to hop off the screen and let him do what he does best, since he's had a show for 30 years. And I know you guys have a long history together, and you guys can take it away. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Amber. Let me give you a little bit of background about Congressman Al Green. He's been serving his 8th term in Congressional District 9 in the United States House of Representatives. Prior to being our congressman, he served as Justice of the Peace for over 26 years before he retired 2004. Then he went on to be president of the Houston branch NAACP and served there for 10 years. Congressman Green serves on Financial Services Committee, where all our legislation runs through. He also serves on 3 subcommittees, as well as the Committee of Homeland Security. He holds the position of Assistant Whip of the Democratic Party. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Congressman Green to our webinar and to give us an update. And Congressman Green, we're going to get right into it because I know your time is valuable. Can you give us an update on the CARES Act?
Yes, I can. And let me thank you, Amber, for helping to facilitate this. And if I may, I would like to get some sense of who's on with us. This was billed as a round table. So my assumption is that there's a finite number of people. Can you just give me some hint as to who's on with us, maybe in terms of offices held within the organization?
Currently, right now, we have about 35 people, and they're constantly joining on. This group is the Government Affairs group that handles government affairs, and Amber is the director. We've got from Mario Araga, past chairman of the Houston Association, Shannon Cobb is here also. Bob Hill is here, who's the executive director of the association. And then we've got all our members that we have in regards to our government affairs. So those are the people that are on. We've got 45 people signed up. So the people that you're going to be talking to is the leadership of HAR and the board, some of the board of directors that are here, and also the members of the government affairs group.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just making a quick note here. Something that I'd like to close with now that I know who's on. I trust that I'll be given an opportunity to give a closing comment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. And you spoke of the CARES Act, and you'd like to know more about what's going on with the CARES Act. Well, as you know, there are negotiations currently pending. And these negotiations are, at this time, said to be, I think, moving a little bit closer to getting something resolved, but it's not there yet. My hope is that we will get there. And quite frankly, my belief is that we'll get there. I cannot believe that there won't be some agreement reached with reference to some of the issues of importance. Here are some of the things that about the CARES Act that you should probably know. It's a $3 trillion piece of legislation, and it provides for $200 billion for the HEROES Act. This is the latest iteration, the HEROES Act. And of that 200 billion, 100 billion provides emergency relief for rental assistance. And it's interesting to note how this will work. I like to know how things work. The renter will have to apply for the assistance. And then after the renter applies for the assistance, there will be some validation of this, and then the rent will be paid. So it really helps the renter as well as the person who happens to be the owner of the property. 75 billion is there for home owner assistance, 11.5 billion for homelessness assistance, and 1 billion for Section 8 vouchers. It's important to talk about this homeless assistance because in this environment, it is important for us to understand that Dr. King was prophetic when he indicated that life is an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. What impacts one directly impacts all indirectly. This is important because we can no longer assume that those people who are living on the streets, living in the streets of life, that they won't impact those who live in the suites of life. The streets and the suites have a connectivity. And we have to now make sure that we take care of homeless people in this country. And I would dare say that this may become a global issue for all countries because these pandemics apparently are not at their end. We will see more of them, and they may even be more severe than what we're looking at and having to contend with currently. So this homeless assistance money is important. The Honorable Maxine Waters, by the way, proposed this before the pandemic occurred. She was part of the avant-garde out front on this issue of dealing with homelessness. And one can well understand why. Dear friends, my dear brothers and sisters, my friends, you should go to Skid Row in Los Angeles. You really should go so that you can see what homelessness looks like. You can see the impact that it has on people. You should go. I went there at her request, and I won't say that it's a life-changing experience, but it is close to having an epiphanous moment to go to Skid Row and see the homelessness and the nature of it. I could say a lot more on it. I'm going to pass up on the rest of it until a later time. So it's important that we take care of those who are housed, keep them in their places of dwelling, but those who are not housed, they must be protected as well. Along with taking care of the renters, the landlords, homeless, we also have in this legislation, hopefully, we're trying to add HR 3702. HR 3702 is something that will be important to us here in Texas, and to a certain extent, it'd be important to the entire country. But this is the Disaster Recovery Act, the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, a bill that I have been honored to sponsor in the Congress. It has passed out of committee. It has passed the House of Representatives. And what it does is provide a rapid delivery system for persons who need housing assistance. And it codifies the Community Development Block Grant Program so that we're talking about the disaster recovery aspect of it, so that people can get the monies that they need in a much more expeditious fashion. Currently, we reinvent the wheel after every disaster. There should not be this process. The process ought to be codified such that we can anticipate, such that major areas of the country, big cities like Houston and other large areas, that they can get some direct funding from the government as opposed to have it trickle down from the top to these various subsets of states. My hope is that we can get this passed, and I may say more about it in just a moment. Finally, I would mention this. We are having a circumstance wherein housing in and of itself has become a part of the crisis. It's the pandemic itself has made housing a paramount issue. It is a part of the crisis now. We are going to have evictions at an unprecedented rate if we don't take this action to help the renters and to help the landlords and to also stay the foreclosures. We've done this as it relates to federally backed mortgages, but now we have to do it for others as well. I'm leaving it to the lawyers to ascertain how that will be done, but to the extent that it can be done, I'm hoping that we will get it done, because the housing crisis is one that impacts the economy. A well economy, meaning a healthy economy, has a good housing market. You're not going to have, and we're not going to have a good housing market, a good economy, unless we have a good housing market. That is part and parcel to having a good economy. So we're going to do everything that we can from our committee perspective to make sure that we have a good housing market. And I firmly say this because I have great faith in the Honorable Maxine Waters, who is the leader of this committee. So with that said, I'll leave that as my answer. And if there are some follow-ups to it at a later time, I'll be more than honored to go into the follow-ups.
Thank you, Congressman. My next question has to deal with independent contractors, such as realtors. How successfully has it been for them to be able to get SBA loans? Do you know any?
Yeah, we have a bit of information for you. I could overwhelm you with information. I'm going to try not to. I had the staff to look into this because I thought it was a fair question. And I'd like to just share some of the statistical information. As of July 31st, 424 CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, and MDIs, Minority Development Institutions, have made over 215,000 PPP loans. And this is for a total amount of $16.25 billion. And analysis of these borrowers by industry indicates that 3% of all PPP loans, all PPP dollars, excuse me, that would be the 15.6 billion, went to 256,000 real estate and rental, as well as leasing small businesses. So you've got 15.6 billion that went to 256,000 entities associated with the businesses that you tend to want to look out for. And I appreciate the fact that you do it. I would also add that Texas has been second only to California in the amount of PPP funding received, over 41 billion to 406,000 Texas small businesses. And millions of Texans who are employed by these entities benefit from what has been accorded to Texas small businesses. I would add this, that the PPP fund terminates, important point, I'm sure you're aware of it, on August the 8th, just a few days from now, it will terminate. And there are funds remaining right now at the level of $128 billion. So as of today, or maybe yesterday when this was codified, we had $128 billion left in the fund. I would encourage you to encourage persons who are eligible, who believe themselves to be eligible, persons, small businesses, to apply. And you can apply to these small banks, these MDIs. You can apply at CDFIs. Apply for the money. 128 billion still there. And I know a lot of the small businesses have not applied because, well, they may have applied early on and they were rejected, or they didn't get a response and they just walked away from the process. My belief is that it is not too late to apply. As of July 31st, 5 million, actual number is 5,083,585 PPP loans were approved for a total of $521.4 billion. 521.4 billion. And here's how that's broken down. 103,000 was the overall average of loans. $103,000, the average loan. The vast majority, 68% of these loans went to 3.4 million small businesses, and they have been for an amount under $50,000. Another 1 million loans, 19%, were between 50 billion and $150 billion. So this seems to be making its way to a good many people that we'd like to see benefit from these loans, but a good many still are not. And we're working with the SBA office here in Houston. Director Jeff Coate has been a good partner to work with. We hope that we'll be able to help many others get loans. Let's make sure that we take advantage of this remaining amount. We believe that there are people who can qualify for it. $128 billion.
Wow. You know, one of the things we've been looking at is stronger infrastructure, which is very critical to the Houston area, especially when it comes to flood resiliency. And just wanted to get your take on what's happening there. And are there any bills that we should be following that you need our help to also get, that we can help you get through?
Yes, the HR 3702 that I mentioned earlier that I'm the sponsor of is something that I would love to have your support on. When you get the opportunity to talk to senators, call it to their attention if you would please, because again, it reforms the disaster recovery process and it has bipartisan support. Ms. Wagner is the co-lead on this with me. She and I have worked very well together to get this done, and it had bipartisan support in the House. In the House, it passed with, I believe, 290 votes, 290. And we didn't get 100%, but that's pretty significant when you can get 290 votes in the House. So we have bipartisan support for it. It will help every community across this country, either directly or indirectly. So please, let's do what we can to get this piece of legislation passed, HR 3702. I beg that you would take a look at it if you have not, and it will be meaningful because we are about to approach hurricane season. We're already into it, and we see that it looks like it's going to be an active year, an active season. So let's make sure that we get our legislation through the House.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that's really important to us because we're realtors is housing. And HUD reappealed the AFFH rule. Do you think this will have a chilling effect of affordable initiatives that'll be coming out? And do we have time? What's needed to fix this? How do we go back with what HUD has just recently did?
Well, I am concerned about it, to be very honest. This is something that the Obama administration put in place. And this is the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule that the Obama administration put in place. This was instituted in 2015, and it required jurisdictions that receive federal housing funds to assess patterns of housing discrimination, devise a plan to address it, and it provided for a critical data-based tool for communities to use as a part of this assessment. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves having to deal with the politics of division based upon race and discrimination. It's very unfortunate, but it is what we have to deal with. And President Obama tried to do what he could to further the process of making sure every person would have an opportunity to buy a home in a place where he or she could afford the home. This is not about giving people anything. It's about making sure that every person will have the opportunity to live in an area where he or she might choose to live. I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at our country. We are a country that believes in merit. We believe that people should succeed on their merits or fail on their demerits. We believe that home ownership is something that every person ought to have the opportunity to buy into, and to buy into wherever you choose to buy into it. If you can afford it, then you should be able to buy it. So my concern is with the president having decided that this program somehow is going to cause people to have their homes devalued. If you can't afford to buy these homes, you won't get one. This is not a program that's designed to just give people a home in a neighborhood. If you can't afford it, you won't get it. It's very simple. It just means that we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to buy. It doesn't guarantee anybody a home any place. So I'm very much concerned about the impact that this will have And I think a lot of the people in the areas that he has called to our attention are concerned because these are integrated areas now. America has integrated to a great extent. Maybe not to the extent that I and some others would like to see it integrated, but it has integrated to a great extent. And a lot of these neighbors in these neighborhoods now are people who have been successful and worked their way up in life to the point that they can buy homes. So I think that the response from the neighborhoods themselves may be a little different than it would have been, say, 20, 30 years ago, when this kind of political tactic maneuver could be used to gather votes. Very unfortunate that it's being used now, but I think the response may be a little bit different than it would have been 10, 20 years ago.
You know, many people feel that DC is broken right now. You've got some amazing institutional knowledge of what's happening in DC. What's your thoughts on it? Can you shed some light how we can fix our current political system that seems to be so divided, so broken from the outside looking in? Can you help us out and tell us what we can do to help and give us some insight?
Yes, thank you for that question. This is a great question, and maybe one of the most important questions that we'll have an opportunity to address. So let's talk about it being broken, and broken in this sense, that there is a divided country. And a lot of the representation that we see in DC reflects the division that we see in the country. So if people in the country are divided and they have views that are antithetical to each other, then you'll probably see this reflected in the persons who are elected to public office. But it's also broken because of a perception that money and influence is corrupting politics. That there's a level of corruption now that is intolerable. That the corruption with reference to the money and those who have the money influencing the politics to the extent that those who have will continue to have, those who do not have will continue to have less. I think that these two things are very important, but then there's a third aspect of it. The third aspect has to do with a perception that the person who holds the office that is supposed to be a unifying force to bring us together, that this office is being used for divisive purposes. And as a result, there's a belief that by many people now that there is someone above the law. It may not be said exactly this way, but there's someone above the law in this country because the person does not immediately gravitate to constitutional norms, and that things have been done that are highly questionable and suspect. So there's a belief that there's someone above the law. And I don't think this bodes well for our country. I think that, however, things of this nature can be resolved in a multiplicity of ways. I'll just mention one because it's lawful. There are many that are lawful. And there's another that I could mention, but I won't go into it in any great detail. But elections make a difference. And I think that people have to vote. I'm not going to campaign for one side or another. I'm just going to tell you that voting makes a difference. And we've seen that now. And that's the ultimate check in our system of checks and balances, elections, the ultimate check. There are other checks as well, but when those are not as efficacious as you might want them to be, then there are other checks. The judiciary is a check. The House of Representatives provides a check. The Senate provides a check. So we got these checks and balances, but there's one other, and that is the polls on election day. And I just thank God that we live in a country where we have these elections and where people can express themselves by and through their ballots. This is important, which is one of the reasons why I continue to fight for free and fair elections. It's important that we have these elections. It's important that we have good housing in this country. I'm straying away a bit, but I just want to mention to you that a lot of the housing laws that we have were written in ink. Pardon me, they were signed in ink, but they were written in blood. Dr. King lost his life, and as a result, we got the Fair Housing Act. John Lewis, he bled on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The blood, it was written in blood, signed in ink, and this is great President Lyndon Johnson signed this Voting Rights Act of '65 into law. So a lot of the things that I benefit from them because there were people who made great sacrifices so that I could have this opportunity. And I just would hope that people would understand that it's not in my DNA to see people continue to suffer from a lack of housing, lack of affordable opportunities, a lack of opportunities to vote in elections. Those are the kinds of things that I can't have it said that I was on the wrong side of for my personal well-being. So I'm grateful that you asked the question because it gave me an opportunity to talk about some things that normally we don't really get into. But my hope is that we'll see some better things occur after November.
All right, I have a couple other questions, and if anyone has any questions, just go to the chat box, put them in, and we'll try to get them in. I've got a couple of other questions I would like to ask. In regards to student debt, our membership is concerned. NAR just recently did a survey that said that the student debt is negatively impacting home ownership, especially when the majority of the new home buyers are millennials, and student debt is like an albatross on their neck. Can you give us some idea of what we can do with financial services to try to ease that a little bit? And because it's almost like another house note. And so can you help us with that?
It is. That's a great analogy. It is comparable in many cases to another house note. Yes, there are many things that we can do. In my committee, and I'm on financial services, and as you pointed out, and I'm the chair of the oversight committee. And with my position as chair of oversight, we have tried to get these persons who are in the business of collecting these loan servicers, to make sure that they give these young people, I say young people because I'm 72, and anybody younger than 72 is young to me. As you get older, you'll realize something that's very important. You don't realize how young old is until you get older. Then you'll start to realize how young old is. But these young people, we want them to be treated fairly. We want them to be given an opportunity to get extensions. We want them to have the opportunity to benefit from having loans repaid by doing public service. And we have some of these things in place. Every person in my office that is eligible for repayment of some portion of their student loans by virtue of working for the federal government, they're getting that opportunity. And this amounts to roughly, please don't hold me to the number, roughly about $10,000 a year. That's added on to what their salary is. When you look at it that way, they're making a nice salary, but they're also able to repay student loans. And as a result of their ability to repay student loans, they are also buying homes. Without giving a name, a person in my office just became a new homeowner, young person. We want to have every person have the opportunity to own a home. And as a result, I think that one of the things that we have to give a lot more consideration to is the post-secondary education and how it's going to be funded. We have to deal with the world as it is now, but there's nothing wrong with imagining a better world. The world as it is now requires loans and repayment of loans, which defers the opportunity to buy a home because you're trying to repay your loan, which is, you agreed to it, so people expect you to repay your loan. But I think that we can imagine a world where your post-high school education after high school, that it's not as expensive for young people who are the persons that will buy that entry-level home, the first home, the affordable home. Usually it's something that, a home that someone else is moving out of, moving up. We want to make sure that they get that opportunity, because a healthy economy is dependent upon homes being sold. I think that we will have to examine how we fund post-high school, post-secondary education in this country. And that there are other ways to do it. My staff gave me some information here on this. Some countries offer no-cost or low-cost post-secondary education, including France, Germany, Ireland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And these countries, in doing this, are having their workforce stabilized. And I think that this is a very good thing for us to do, give some consideration as to how we handle it in the future. So thank you for that question. We're talking about $1.5 trillion, by the way, more than $1.5 trillion in student loan money.
Well, a couple of questions have come through the chat box, and one of the chat questions was, how do we monitor the delivery of the flood dollars that are coming from the federal government, making sure they're being applied to the projects they're supposed to do? Is there any way that we can monitor that?
You're saying we as in members, just any person in the community?
Yeah, any person, our association, anybody that's concerned with infrastructure, because the dollars are coming in. And so we've had bond elections with these dollars to kind of match them. And so how do we make sure that these dollars are being appropriately to the right projects that are being there that we were told they were going to be for, and not being borrowed for something else?
Well, what we've tried to do as of late with these dollars as they're being allocated at Congress as we appropriate them is to require the institutions of government that are receiving the dollars to post on a website that the dollars have been received and that they are being used for the intended purposes. That's what we've tried to do. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm not sure that this is something that is happening in every circumstance across the country. But I do know that there are websites where you can get some sense of how your money is being spent, and that should be the case. So let me do a follow-up with you on that one. It's a good question, fair question, but I cannot give you the answer that I'd like to give. So I'll do a follow-up, and we'll get some additional information to you so that you can get it out to all of the people who are on this webinar, as well as other persons.
Our membership.
Yes.
Since we're in the flood thought process, how are we doing on the flood insurance reauthorization? Are we going to ever get this fixed?
Well, we will get it resolved. They're just competing. Remember, you asked a question earlier about a broken system. We have competing philosophies, and I'm going to respect those that have a different point of view from me, even though I would differ with them greatly. I'm going to respect it because we have these competing philosophies. There are people who believe that we should have, some who literally believe that there should be no flood insurance from the government, that private enterprise can take care of this. I'm not one of them. I've just not seen the evidence of private enterprise being able to price the product so that people can afford it and then be able to buy a home. Because if you don't get the flood insurance, then you're not going to get the mortgage. And if you don't get the mortgage, you're not going to have a home. So I'm just not one of the persons who believes that a private industry is going to be able to resolve it. So the question becomes, how do we achieve a balance so that persons who believe that there should be little or no government involvement, and persons such as myself who believe that the government should have some amount of involvement, how do we balance that? And that's what we've been trying to do, is achieve that balance. We've come close a couple of times, and you've had your hopes elevated because you thought that we were about to do something, and then we find that we just didn't quite get there. And our suspicion is that we will achieve that balance. It's very difficult to achieve the balance when you're in an election cycle. This close to an election, it's very difficult to achieve the balance. I regret to say it, but it is. So my hope is that immediately after the election, we will start to take this issue up for a long-term process. We've been doing short-term extensions, but we need a long-term process, extension, if you will, or just extend it, and so that people can have the certainty associated with the necessity of getting a loan, and the lenders will have certainty. This would be very beneficial to the economy. I believe we can do it.
I'd like to also send a shout out to our chairman of the board, John Nugent. Under his leadership, we're doing these sort of programs with our membership and with you, Congressman Green. And I just want to thank you, John Nugent, our chairman, for making this possible for us to do these sort of programs. We've had a couple of questions in regards to mail-in voting. What's your thoughts on mail-in voting? Are we going to be able to get everybody to be able to vote who are concerned with their health? What's your thoughts?
You know, I regret that you can't see my smile as you ask these questions. For edification purposes, I have this mask on because I took the test. This is my second time taking the coronavirus test. And I believe that, and by the way, no symptoms, feel great, did my exercise program this morning. I exercise every morning, feel great. But I also encouraged people a couple of days ago to take this test at a center that we helped to establish in my congressional district. To take it, you don't have to have symptoms. To take it, you don't need an appointment. To take it, you but have to have the will to come over and take the test. Well, I try to lead by example. So rather than tell people wear a mask and I not wear one, I don't think that's a good way to lead. So I wear a mask. But also, if you take the test, you ought to, in my opinion, be protective of the people around you. So if for example, I take the test and then I continue to not have my mask on when I have persons that are in my office and other places, I think that I'm not doing them a good service. So I'm wearing the mask because I want to make sure that I behave properly, given that I have taken the test. That's the reason. So now, to your question about, why don't you repeat it again to make sure I have it exactly right, having strayed away from it to the extent that I have.
The question in regards to mail-in voting.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? Are we going to be able to get a compromise, or this is going to be okay? What's your thoughts on mail-in voting? Do you feel we can do it and have a safe system, safe voting system?
Okay. My feelings are not as hard and fast as some. I'll be very candid. I think that it can be done, but I think that we need to fund the infrastructure to get it done. I don't think that mandating something means that we're going to get it right. I think that it can be done, but we need to fund the infrastructure to make sure it is done properly. We have demonstrated with mail-in voting, that has another name, absentee ballots. We've demonstrated across the country that we can do this. So as we now increase the number of persons who will participate in a mail-in process, I think we ought to do some additional funding to make sure that every state has the opportunity to do it in a way that will be similar, if not the same, to the way it has been perfected in states that have been doing it. And that may cost some additional funds, that may require additional monies. So I want every state to be funded properly so that we can do this properly. This is always important, having elections that we can conclude have been free and fair in our country. I'm for free and fair elections. I am for mail-in ballots. I think that it's an appropriate way, especially with the COVID-19 still lurking and taking lives. No question that it kills, and no question that people who are older seem to be susceptible to it, young people too. But I'm just speaking for persons who are older who would not want to go out because of this. so I think that to give people the opportunity to vote by mail is something that we'll either do it now or we'll do it later.
Okay.
It's a part of our future. It's not
Okay.
something that we will opt out of indefinitely. We will do it eventually. It's just a matter of whether we'll do it now or at some future time, and whether we're willing to spend the money to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. So I support it, is the answer.
Good, thank you. Couple of other questions, and I'll try to get to them quickly. Net neutrality in regards to the internet. I know with what's going on, I'm sure my members will tell you the internet slows down. I know you voted with us before on how important net neutrality is. You even went against your party vote and voted with us. And this is something that a lot of the members don't understand. But right now, having an internet that everybody has access, you got kids at school, kids that may not have a fast internet at home. What's your thoughts on getting this up and running and as an infrastructure item that we need to do?
Well, it is infrastructure, and it is important. And my position has not changed. So I want to see us get this up and running. And I'm glad you brought the children in, because there are many, many children now who will be in their bedrooms. Their classrooms will become their bedrooms, or the kitchen table, or someplace in the home that's going to become the classroom. And we want every child to have equal access to this information, and we want them to get it as quickly as they can get it. It's important for learning that this information be received by all people at an equal response time. Let me put it that way, so that kids can respond to their teachers in their classroom. So I'm very much for it. And I would also add more to it. I think that we are going to have to, at some point, decide that every child will have a computer, but not only have the computer, but have access to someone outside of the home who can help with getting the child online. Someone's going to have to work with children, because a good many children are teaching parents how to use the internet. And if the children don't know and the parents don't know, then that means that we need to provide some assistance. So we need programs developed national in scope. The federal government needs to do more funding of this as it relates to education, because the foundation upon which every nation rests is the education of its people. So we've got to educate young people, and a lot of this is going to take place from home. So I'm very much for having an internet that allows equal access so that young people can benefit from this knowledge that they have to acquire as rapidly as some mega corporation can benefit from getting information. And I think that this is not an unreasonable request for us to adhere to. I think we can do this, and I'm all for making sure it happens.
Well, one last question, and everybody on this call will know that I'm going to ask this question. I'd be remiss if I didn't. It's regards to the census. Would you explain to us how undercounting would hurt Texas in regards to Texas? Texas right now is ranked 39th in self-response. Houston is ranked 7th, the last place in large major cities. How it would affect your district, all the districts, if we get people undercounted and don't count the population that we have here in this city, here in this state, in this county. How important is the census to get the correct account? And you mentioned funding earlier.
It's very important for the funding, but it's also important for your representation in Congress. If we undercount in Texas and other states count properly, we will probably lose representation in terms of what's projected, the projected representation, because we're about to get more representation. California is a pretty large delegation. Texas competes with California and New York in terms of representation by way of number of delegates that we send to Congress. So it's important for us to count everybody so that we will have the proper number of persons representing us in Congress. It would be very unfortunate for us to intentionally undercount in Texas, while others are doing whatever they can to get their count accurate or as high as they can get it. And then we lose representation in Congress that we should have in terms of projected representation. So I'm all for making sure we get a good count for the representational aspect of it. But also, I want a good count because the dollars that we will need to help in various communities with programs like Head Start, programs that will benefit our communities, we won't get those dollars. Now, you can have a higher level of poverty in Texas and have persons not getting good educations, have less infrastructure dollars sent to Texas, and we need our infrastructure repaired. We can suffer through it, but I don't think we should, when all we have to do is count the people in Texas so that we will get our fair share of our tax dollars, by the way. These are not tax dollars that are alien to us. We send our tax dollars to the government, and we would like a return on our investment. So let's get a return on investment and get our tax dollars back to us because of the number of people that are in Texas. Now, here's where I should stop there and leave it there, and let my sensibilities don't always align with my politics. I know that there are persons who don't want to count people who are undocumented. I understand this. But I also know that we can accept the world as we would like it to be and not count people, or we can accept the world as it is, people who are here, undocumented. Census doesn't say that you count only documented people. It's just not in the law. The Constitution doesn't say it. So if we decide we're going to create a rule for Texas that doesn't apply to other places, or the people who are in leadership positions decide, well, we're going to undercount certain people, it's a mistake, because in other places they're going to be properly counted, and the persons who are here. And if we undercount, then we're just going to only hurt ourselves in terms of representation, as well as getting our tax dollars back to us in the state of Texas. There are plenty of other places that take on the challenge of whether persons are documented or undocumented, and how we should handle that. I think comprehensive immigration reform is the way to do it, by the way, but the census is not the place to bring this battle. This is not the place to do it. It can only hurt a state like Texas.
Congressman Green, on behalf of the Government Affairs.
But can I have a closing comment?
Yes,
Remember,
sir, you can.
I said I wanted to have a closing comment. Okay, thank you. And if I'm going too long, I apologize. But
no, we appreciate you. It's your time.
Well, I want to tell you this. First of all, I appreciate the realtors. I appreciate these kinds of interactions where I get an opportunity to talk to you and get feedback from you. I assure you, a lot of what I have done in Congress has been because I have this relationship with you where we exchange ideas. It is very unfortunate, but a good many of us who are on the Financial Services Committee don't have a background in real estate. We've not been realtors. We've not been where the rubber meets the road, as it were. And you provide that kind of intelligence, and it makes a difference. I have tried to change things that we've passed made into law, simply because I talked to you and I've come to realize that it's just not working. And when you get that dose of reality, then you want to change the reality so that things can function properly. So I want to thank you for the service that you render. This is an important service, and I would defend what you do in terms of affording us real-time information about the reality of the legislation that we pass. It's important, and I thank you for it. Final comment is this: the winds of change are sweeping across our nation. The inevitable winds of change, the inescapable winds of change We can't stop it. Now, we can resist, but we cannot stop it. What do I mean by the winds of change? The way we have done business is going to change. I'll give you one good example. Prior to the pandemic, I never had a Zoom call with a forum such as this. I just didn't do it. You would come to Washington, D.C., and I was always appreciative that you would. You would have a great delegation come into my office. We would sit, we would talk. You were spending money on airfare. You were spending money on hotels. You were spending money on food. You were neglecting things that you could be doing back home. Dear friends, I don't know whether you will do it, but a good many businesses now realize that Zoom saves money, that Zoom is going to give them the opportunity to do with more people. You said you got 35, 40 people, whatever the number was.
42.
Well, on this call, wait, getting 42 people in my office can be done in DC, but it may be a little bit more difficult than with this Zoom call. So what I'm saying to you is there are things happening that are going to change, and we can't escape this change. Another aspect of it, now that was related to technology, but there's another aspect of it that I want us to realize is inevitable. The change associated with the elimination of invidious discrimination in housing. It still exists, and it must be dealt with. And we're seeing now more and more people understand. The problem that we've had in great part is that people haven't understand the extent that this really does happen. That information is getting out now. And people with the knowledge, people of goodwill are saying, though, that's not right. They've taken the approach that John Lewis called to our attention. Good friend, great freedom fighter. And that is that if you see something wrong, that is not fair, that is not just as he put it, that is not right, then you got to say something. So you're going to see more legislation in the area of fair housing to make housing more accessible to all people in this country, to make loans more accessible. We want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. A good many people don't have boots. Loans become boots with the straps that people can pull themselves up by. But we're going to see these changes. So I'm appreciative that this organization has embraced change, and it makes a difference in the lives of people. So thank you very much. I'm going to yield back to you, my dear brother and friend, and I consider all of you brothers and sisters, as Dr. King and others have put it, one race, the human race. So if we're not brothers and sisters, we're at least cousins. So to you, my brothers and sisters and cousins, I thank you for this opportunity to visit with you today.
Well, thank you, Congressman Green. I really do appreciate you taking out of your busy day to talk with us. More importantly, I want to thank Chairman of the Board, John Nugent, for allowing us to be able to do a webinar and bring you into our homes on our Zoom computers to hear you. And I want to thank Government Affairs for helping put this product together so we can talk to our members of Congress. And Congressman Green, you have been a champion for realtors, and I just appreciate you because, and I've told my members here in Government Affairs, every time I called you, you delivered. And if any time I've called you and you couldn't deliver, you tell me why and give me a way that I can work it to make it better. So I really do appreciate it. And from the board from the Houston Association of Realtors and all 40,000 of our members, we thank you and we appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody. God bless. Thank you.